Hello. I want to talk about Naomi Judd, Part 1, The Incompleted Scream. Now, I came across this book she wrote in 2015, published in 2016, something like that. And I had no idea she was going through mental illness. This is the first book I've read from Naomi Judd. I was at Walmart and it was on sale, so I bought the book. I think the Lord meant for me to read that book. I really do. But I think what she went through. I read the whole book from cover to cover. It is an incompleted scream. Now, in my opinion, this is my opinion. I'm not a psychologist, okay? That's not my profession. Naomi Judd has a lot of cells, okay? She has a lot of cells, okay? All these are the bad cells, and these are good cells. Okay, now, when you give these cells names, that's when it becomes multiple personality disorder. When you say, okay, I acted obnoxiously, then, and his name is Charlie, okay? When you give names to these cells, it's called multiple personality disorder. Now, what they call it in the Christian world, spirits. Now, these are all her bad cells, okay? These are her bad cells, okay? And then these are her good cells. And they all in one body, okay? They're all in one body, and they're jockeying for position. They're jockeying for dominance. Some of her bad selves are rebellion, inappropriate verbiage, manipulator. She gives people the finger, raucous behavior, a bully, a thief, obnoxious behavior, a control freak. She steals. She's untrustworthy. And that's not what we think of her. And then her good selves are this high intellect. I can see where Ashley gets her intellect from. High intellect. She watches her money. She manages her money. She's glamorous. That's the good selves that we see. Okay? Now, it's a good read. I have to admit, I think it's a very good read. It's the type of read where you get some apple cider and you just read it. Get some hot apple cider and read it. Now, the doctor told her that a lot of times mental illness is hereditary, and she did some research in her family on both sides of the family tree, and she found out she had a lot of mental illness, agoraphobia, inability to bond with children, alcoholism, etc., etc. She had issues with her mother. There was just, she didn't bond with her mother. Okay? And maybe that's why Winona did not bond with her. There was an attempted rape or molestation when she was about 3 or 4 years old, by her Uncle Charlie, which I guess is her grandmother's brother. And he came into her room and, took his thing out of his pants, and she was unable to scream. So she hit him. And so when she ran out of the room, she never did scream. She never did complete the scream. And so if you don't scream when you're a child, you're going to scream as an adult. I think that's where some of her panic attacks came from. And she knew at age 3 to 4, there was no point in telling her mother that. It was no point. It was no point in telling her aunties what had just happened. That's why I say, try to keep when children are even toddlers, try to keep the communication doors open. Try to talk to them. How was school today? What did you do at school today? Did so-and-so say anything to you? And so on. Try to keep your doors of communication open from the toddler on to when they're an adult. So when you go through something like this, you have to go through a healing process. And she never received any kind of therapy for that up until the time she was in her 70s or 60s or 70s when she wrote the book. A lot of people in their 70s and 80s still heal from childhood trauma. Joyce Myers is probably still in the healing process from her childhood traumas, and she's in her 80s. It's a lifelong process to heal from molestation or child rape. It's a lifelong healing process. Naomi never got to scream. Okay, if she didn't scream in her 5 or 6 years old, and then there was another attempted rape by this same uncle when she was about 5 or 6 years old, and she told him, "My father's going to kill you," and then he left. But see, she never got to complete that scream. She never got a chance to tell anybody. And you know what? If you don't scream when you're young, you're going to scream when you're old. So what happened? Her body and her mind demanded that she scream. And I think this has a lot to do with her panic attacks. Either she's going to scream when she's young or she's going to scream when she's old. You know, I suppressed a lot of memories of mine until I was 27 years old. And then everything came crashing down. And so I'm still from 27 to now, I'm still in the healing process. I just tell God, you know, this happened, that happened. And what am I going to do about it, and so on. Because some people cannot afford a therapist at $200 an hour. Okay? And then you add to that a lot of trauma that she suffered, like the older girl who tried to drown her when she was a preteen. You add that to them, okay? An older girl. And then when she tried to tell her mother that the older girl tried to drown her, her mother dismissed it, said, don't be so dramatic. So she just longing to, that's why I'm saying, don't be such a lazy mother that you won't listen to your child, particularly when they're at that vulnerable age, preteen and teen. Listen to your child. When she was 13 and she got ready for the school dance, of course she poofed to her and all that, like any girl would, and her mother took a jar of pickles that she was pickling and just put it on her head. That was so cruel. I mean, it was just so cruel. I mean, I was shocked when I read it. That was so cruel. Okay, and of course she didn't go to the dance. Okay, there is no bonding whatsoever with her mother. And her and Winona, I mean, I guess over the years, they just tolerate each other's existence. I guess that's the attitude that her and Winona have. They just tolerate each other's existence. Now, a lot of these, she does have a spirit of rebellion. Now, that passes from generation to generation. And then she suffered more trauma. A boyfriend that everybody had told her to stay away from raped her. Now, see, that's rebellion. When people tell you to stay away from him and you go with him anyway, that's rebellion. So that passed on to, you know, Winona. He raped her. So you got all these traumatic things that happened to her over the years. And she never dealt with it. There was never any type of therapy. And see, the mind and the body remembers those. Cell memory. The mind and the body remembers those trauma. It's physical, psychological, and spiritual. And it was never resolved. So like I said, that's why her body, I think, in her mind went into convulsions. Because all these cells are trying to jockey for position. And she never screamed. She never got to scream. So if you don't scream when you're young, your body's going to scream when you're old. It's going to come to the surface. Now, like I said, you know, to me, I have a semblance of peace. What I try to do is, you know, I talk to the Lord about this happened, that happened. That's my therapy. So you have to do whatever you're going to do to make peace. You have to try to forgive people. It's an everyday process. It's a long-term healing process. The first thing you have to do is acknowledge that it did happen. It was not a fantasy. Don't lie to yourself. It did happen. Okay, if you lie to yourself, you're going to be tormented even more. Number 2, admit that it was painful and it was horrible. Number 3, don't do that to your children. Don't put that same abuse on your children. Don't let your children go to anybody's house. I didn't allow mine to go to anybody's house where there's an opportunity for rape and assault and who knows what else. Don't raise your children the way you were raised. Forgive. Okay, you have to forgive them. Try not to raise your children to be aware of molestation and rape, and so they won't be at the wrong place at the wrong time. And try not to act like your parents. If your parents were abusive, challenge yourself to not to act like them. So that was the first part, and the second part is next.